for those of you guys who are joining us, and I did this training session last month. Hello from Ohio. Last month for our Academy members, and wanted to give everybody else a bit of an insight on how our monthly calls work for our Academy members. So every month at typically on the last Thursday of every month, we do a monthly coaching call on a variety of different topics. And so last month happened to be on staff accountability. And I hope that everybody else can find it really helpful. I know that it's something that a number of, we all struggle with it and have evolved with it and stuff. And so hoping that we can definitely provide some support. And then you can also see what one of the features of being part of the Academy is about. So hopefully everybody can see that on their screen. I'm gonna pull up the chat box on here so I have access to that. So again, this was a version of this is a redo webinar on our Next Gen Academy monthly coaching call so that you guys can see what that's all about and learn a little bit more about how you guys can keep your staff accountable. Okay, so if you missed it already, guys, I just want to make sure that you take note that our conference itinerary is live. If you haven't had an opportunity to take a look at it, oh my gosh, there are so many fantastic, amazing sessions going on, from how to grow your gym, how to work with your staff, how to hire your staff. We're even doing sessions I'm doing one on whether or not opening up a second facility or another facility is the right thing for you. Where if you have partners, Danielle's doing a session on partners and stuff as well. And how to work with partners and how to have a great relationship with your partners. So those, just examples of some of the things that we're doing, talking about marketing in a variety of different forms, email marketing, social media marketing, finances, you name it, things are being covered. So if you're not registered for conference already, you're definitely going to want to do that. Then the next thing, again, guys, today we're talking about staff accountability and recognition. So let's dive in here, and welcome to everybody who's on. So the first thing that I want you to take a moment on, just so I kind of get an idea of where everybody's at, if you can write on a scale of 1 to 10 and post it in the chat box, how would you rate how well you hold your staff accountable right now? On a scale from 1 to 10, where obviously 10 is like, yeah, I got this. My staff, I hold them accountable. I am great at recognition. We knock it out of the park with that. That's a 10, where 1 is, you know what, we need to work on it. I have a really hard time holding my staff accountable. Post it in the chat box. Looks like there's lots of you guys already putting it in there. So 5, 7s, 5s, great. Keep popping it in there just so we know where everybody's at with it. And 8, awesome stuff. That's great to hear. I think you'll still be able to get some really great stuff from this. Where else is everybody else at? Savannah, 5 to 6, definitely been working on this. I have to admit, guys, I was probably at one point in time a 5 or a 6. I have a hard time with confrontation or conflict, and that makes me a little bit nervous and anxious. And so sometimes when you're uncomfortable, you avoid things, right? So it's something that we have worked on and put some great systems in place for it as well. And I think that's a big piece of it, is making sure that you have systems that will assist you in holding people accountable for that. So anybody else want to pop it in there? Where on a scale from 1 to 10, how would you rate how well you hold your staff accountable? Pop it in there. There's lots of you guys on today, so definitely toss it in, guys. Hello to those of you guys who just were making it on here. Great to see you. So if you haven't figured out where the chat box is, find that right now. Toss in there, on a scale from 1 to 10, how would you rate how well you hold your staff accountable? Give you just a second. Great. So we're kind of middle of the pack for most everybody. So I think you'll get some really great stuff out of this. So I wanted to share a video with you here. I'll turn it on and enjoy. Maybe.
Why is it so important that we get real commitment? Well, that sounds obvious. But the real reason why, there's a practical reason, because if we don't get commitment, then we're going to have the next dysfunction at our doorstep. And that is the avoidance of accountability. God bless you. This is the worst, most common problem. We have an online team assessment that teams take, and they get a scorecard back of this triangle that says green, yellow, red, which are the ones that are good or bad. And this is usually the lowest score. What happens is when people haven't committed to a decision, they're not going to have the courage to hold one another accountable for that, for the behavior that goes with it. They're not going to have the courage to hold one another accountable. Notice what I said there. I didn't say the leader holding them accountable. I said them holding one another accountable. You see, on great teams, accountability is peer-to-peer. Peer pressure in your organization is the best kind of accountability. You want people turning to one another. What's the opposite of that is when people see a team member not supporting something, they go, oh, hey, boss, I want to tell you, she's not supporting this. Don't tell her it was me that told you, but I just want you to know. And the boss is like, oh, great, I get to go. And he goes to that person, hey, I understand you're not doing it. Who told you that? Well, don't worry about who told you. I just want to, and now they're wondering who ratted them out, and there's all this politics, and the leader's dragged into it. What a great thing when people turn to one another. What's wrong? What's going on? I don't think this is what we agreed to. And give them the benefit of the doubt to explain what's happening, but call them on it directly. Okay? Now, how do we create a team environment where there's peer accountability and we as leaders are not getting dragged into it all the time? Well, there's an irony to this. The only way to create an environment where people will hold each other accountable is if we as leaders are willing to confront difficult issues. See, the irony is if I as a leader am willing to confront people, then people know, well, he's going to do it anyway. We might as well do it for each other. But if I, as a leader, do not like to hold people accountable, and let me tell you something, I don't. I'm bad at this one. This is my problem as a leader. I'm very aware of that. I do not like to hold people accountable. You know what that means? My team isn't going to do it. Why should they do it? Pat's going to let you off the hook anyway. See, the irony is by me not being willing to, they're not going to do it. By the way, there's a technical term for people who don't like to hold their folks accountable. I don't know if you've ever studied graduate level psychology or business, but I'm what's called a wuss. Okay? And you know what's funny? Most of the leaders I work with are also wusses. Most of them don't think so. In fact, most CEOs I work with will say, well, Pat, I don't have a problem with accountability. Let's just move right on to the next thing. And I'm like, well, that's great to know. Why do you say that, though? And they say, well, because I fire people all the time. I mean, I fired a guy just last week. Pick someone. I'll fire him right now just to prove it to you. Of course, firing someone is often the last act of cowardice, not accountability. Sometimes it's necessary. Oh, I know that. But oftentimes it's not. See, let me tell you a couple stories. I worked with a CEO once. He got hired by a big company that was kind of struggling. And they gave him the title of CEO, President, and Chief Operating Officer. He had all the big titles. A year after stabilizing this company, he went to the board of directors and he said, listen, I don't want to be the president and chief operating officer anymore. I just want to be the CEO and focus on strategy and externals. I want to hire somebody to run the day-to-day operations. The board said, hey, you've earned the right to do that. Fine. So he went out looking for a new president and chief operating officer. And while he was out looking, one of the members of his team, who I will call Fred started to tell his peers, I'm going to be the next president. It will be me. And I remember this and I thought, it must be true. I mean, who would say that? Well, people did not like Fred at all on the executive team. He was not liked at all. And people were really concerned that they were going to have to work for this guy. So finally, one member of the executive team went to the CEO and said, can I ask you a question? The CEO said, sure. He said, did you know that Fred is telling everybody he's going to be the next president? And the CEO said, no, I had no idea. That's news to me. I had not heard that. And he said, okay, next question. Is he going to be the next president? The CEO said, oh, no, I would never do that. No, there's no chance. No. Oh, good. Okay, last question. Are you going to tell him to stop telling everybody that? Here's what the CEO said in this case verbatim, but I've heard this from many leaders over the years, the same kind of answer. The CEO said, oh, I don't have the time and the energy for that. I don't have the time and the energy for that. I don't know about you, but can you imagine the CEO picked up the phone? Hey, Fred, it's the CEO. How you doing? Yeah. Hey, you're not going to be the next president. No, you're not. Yeah. You're kind of pissing me off that you're telling everybody that. Yeah, you should stop, buddy. Yeah, if you don't stop doing that, something bad's going to happen to you. Okay, have a great day. Bye-bye. Who's tired? I'm not tired. That took what, 10 seconds? I don't have the time and the energy for that. Once it happened to me directly. I was working for the CEO of a company. I was in charge of leadership development and organizational communication, right? And I had my annual budget review with his chief financial officer. And he was an old school curmudgeon-y CFO. And when we sat down to go through it, he said, Pat, before we get into your numbers, I'd like to tell you that if it were up to me, I'd fire you and your staff and put the savings to the bottom line of the company, because I think what you do is silly. But I'm from California, so I thanked him for sharing. You know, I appreciated that. And then I said, Fred, I call him all Fred. I said, Fred, but these are the CEO's programs, and you don't like them. Why don't you just go have it out with him? He's your next door neighbor in this big company. And why don't you either convince him that you're right and put me out of my misery, or let him convince you that he's right and get on board? He said, I'm not going to talk to him. I don't care. And I said, then I will. Fine. Next day, I knocked on the CEO's door. I said, hey, Fred hates the stuff I'm doing for you. He doesn't, you got to talk to him about it. He goes, oh, that's just Fred. Everybody knows Fred's like that. I said, well, not everybody knows Fred, because this company was the size of this room. And I said, and even if they do know Fred, it still hurts the programs and it makes the executive team look bad. And he said to me, oh, Pat, I don't have time for that. I got angry customers to deal with. I got lawsuits to worry about. I got Wall Street. I don't have time for that. Now, what do you notice about both of those examples? Neither of them didn't have the time and the energy to hold people accountable for missing their numbers 4 quarters in a row. Because all of us, even the wussiest of us leaders, will hold somebody accountable for quantitative results that are problematic. They didn't have the time and the energy to hold people accountable for their behaviors. Ladies and gentlemen, behavioral accountability always precedes the results. And we see the behaviors that we know are going to lead to problems, and yet it's the hardest thing as a leader to hold somebody accountable or to confront them about their behavior, because we might be wrong, and it's a little subjective, and it seems judgmental, and they might not like it. So we just say, I'll just wait and see how the numbers turn out. Instead of having the courage, and it's courage and love, to confront them about the behaviors that they need to change. See, I don't like holding people accountable. And I used to think it was because I cared so much about my employees that I didn't want them to feel bad. And one day I realized it was selfishness that kept me from doing that, because I didn't want them to blame me for feeling bad, and I didn't want to be around them when they did. Okay, you know who taught me the brilliance of and the importance of accountability? My son Connor. He's a management guru. He's 15, but don't think I'm taking management advice from a 15-year-old, a teenager. He was 7 when he taught this to me. So Connor's a twin, and him and his brother Matthew got put into timeout. Matthew got put into timeout as I was getting ready to tell bedtime stories. So he had to leave the room, and I'm in the bunk bed with Connor telling him a bedtime story. About halfway through, Matthew comes back into the room and says, are you guys not done yet? And I said, no, we're halfway through the story. And like any good 7-year-old, he says, can I stay for the second half? Like any dad who's been around the block before, I say, sure, come on in, because I'm a wuss. So I start to tell the story. My wife comes in, Laura, thankfully not a wuss, and she says, what's he doing in here? And I'm like, well, he missed the first half. I thought he could stay for the second. She goes, no, Matt, you're out of here. You're in timeout. So Matthew does the walk of shame. The emotional guy that I am, I feel really bad for him. I feel sad that I put him through that. I turn around. Connor, my 7-year-old son, looks at me and he says this, and he did. Dad, if you don't hold him accountable, he's never going to learn the consequences of his actions. 7 years old, lecturing me, a management expert, about the need to hold people accountable. Here's the truth, though, and here's how I learned it. If we love someone, and I hope you love the people that work for you, you owe it to them to hold them accountable, even if they don't love you back for it. Many times they are not going to. We know this as parents, but we get in the working environment, we think, I don't really want to do that. We have to love someone enough, talk about selfless love, that we will hold them accountable even if they injure us for that.
All right, guys, such a great video. I hope you got a lot out of that. There's so many great snippets in there. So as I was preparing for this session, I came across the following quote that I thought was very fitting for it. So the primary responsibility of a leader is to unleash the greatness in those who follow them. And I think this is an important piece of it. I don't know if anybody of you can relate, but maybe just post in the comments if you feel like you're one of those wusses. I know I can totally relate to that. I feel like I have been a wuss. And as I mentioned, have definitely been able to change that. So how can you do that? How can you unleash the greatness in those who follow you if you're not holding them accountable? Something that we often hear is that our staff just don't care as much as we do, right? I'm sure that there are lots of you guys that have felt that way. And in a few cases, maybe they don't care as much as you do. However, you have to remember that the vast majority of situations, people want to do a good job. They really don't want to do a bad job, right? They want to do a good job for you. So then you need to evaluate some of the systems and processes around your hiring, your onboarding, your training, and how you hold your staff accountable. The co-authors of Crucial Conversations, which is also a really great book that I'd highly recommend reading. And that video was Pat Lencioni. If you're not familiar with him as well, he has some outstanding books that are well worth reading and stuff too. So the co-authors of Crucial Conversations found that one of the ways to determine the health of an organization was to measure the lag time between when people see something and when people say it. So the time from the in-between time from when you see something happening to when you say something about it. If the time frame from between when you see something and when you then say something or hold staff accountable or whatever it might be is large, that's when problems start to develop. I'm sure that you guys can all relate. We've had a staff member that we had hired in our preschool program as an assistant in there, and there was a number of issues. You know, she was on her phone while she was working and not engaged with the kids and not following through on tasks that we had asked her to do, and we didn't do our due diligence in holding her accountable, and as a result it got worse, and we had to then remove her and fire her from the program. So if we had dealt with it earlier and dealt with it better and put some better systems in place, then maybe we wouldn't have had to remove her from that and fire her. So our goal as leaders and owners, and not just ourselves as owners, but also your leadership team within your gyms, is to decrease that gap from the time frame in which something happens and to the time that you talk to people. That being said, obviously you still need to wait until the time is right and the time is appropriate. So remember that accountability breeds responsibility. It's an important piece of it too. So what I want you to do is just think a little bit about and post in the chat box. Every large problem was once a small problem. So for example, that with my preschool staff that was not addressed. What are some small problems that you haven't been confronting that are going on right now? Post that in the chat box. What are some small problems that you realize are going on within your gym that you have not been confronting? Take a second and post those in the chat box. Some frustrations that maybe you have had with your staff. I know when we did this last time with our academy, in the academy group last month, a number of them was regarding cleaning or putting mats away, and staff weren't following through on stuff. So we've got, look at that, great. So staff lack of follow through on admin tasks. Coaches talk to other coaches who are finished with their classes before they are finished. So chit chat in the gym, small things when they clean. Yep, staff not sticking to their cleaning duties. Right, yep, and not checking everything off on their cleaning list. Totally. Anything else that you guys have had struggles with? Unfocused during practices. Lots of things. So you realize that there are things that are going on that you probably need to address, and just know that the longer you hold off on addressing them, then the bigger the problem it becomes, right? Okay, so we realize that there are things out there, talking to each other versus addressing the kids. Yeah, totally get it. So what then do you need to do? There are 2 steps in this. Number 1, you have to have standards, right? If you don't have standards, you don't have anything to lean on. So for example, your core values or your guiding principles, your systems on expectations. This is, for example, this is who we are and this is what we stand for and this is how we do. So it starts in your hiring and onboarding and training process. I know that our hiring process has changed drastically over the years. I remember chatting with our preschool teacher who's been with us now, I think 9 years. And when we first hired her, we were hiring warm bodies at that point in time. We needed people that were going to fill those gaps. And so she came in for an interview. It probably lasted maybe 10 minutes and I hired her pretty much on the spot. And so now it's quite extensive, our hiring process, in that we do an initial first call that is not by me, that they go through a sequence of questions and stuff there. And if they are going to be moving on from that, then we set up a second interview that is in person, and that's with me involved and another staff member. So the hiring process has definitely changed significantly, right? And so we've been able to, now that we have some core values in place, now that we have some more systems in place, that has helped in our hiring process and then our onboarding as well and our training. So think about what systems you have in place, and stuff like, what are your write-up procedures, right? That's a big piece of it as well. Do you have some write-up procedures in place for that? We just recently had our handbook totally reviewed by our lawyer as well. And one of the pieces that he touched on was the write-up procedure. Ours was, prior to him reviewing it, was the first step in that would be a verbal warning, and then the second was a written warning. Third one was another written warning, and then after that, if there was something else that comes up, then we would fire them. And he highly recommended getting rid of the verbal warning part of it, because it creates that he said, she said. If you're going to give somebody a verbal warning, you also then need to have somebody else in there. And so we've now changed it to just being the written warnings. And up until the last few years, that's been something that we haven't done a lot of, just because I was that wuss, right? And now we know that it's harder to hold staff accountable and have things tracked if you're not putting those systems in place and those write-ups and stuff. So make sure you have those things in place. And then the second piece is communication. So always start with why. Why are you doing things a certain way? There's, if you haven't, I'm sure all of you guys have heard of Simon Sinek's Start With Why book. That's also a really great one to take a look at. But if they, especially the generation that we're hiring, if they understand why things are being done a certain way, they're way more likely to buy into it. Why does it have to be cleaned at the end of the night? Well, for us, it's because we have classes first thing in the morning again, and we need to make sure that it's clean for those guys that are coming in. And yeah, so then the second piece is communicate when there are issues quickly. Again, you want to decrease that lag time. Address them when they are small so they don't have a chance to get big. Savannah said, yeah, just had a talk with staff. She was so frustrated with, and she stopped doing everything since, and then stopped doing everything since she explained why. So that why piece is so important, guys. Make sure you're communicating that with them. So, that communication piece as well, when it's something that's small, is important. So for example, talk to somebody the first time that they're late, right? If you let it go for a long period of time and they're late consistently, then it's going to become a habit. B, set a standard for the rest of your staff, showing that it's okay for people to be late. We had somebody fairly recently that with our birthday parties, the responsibility of our staff is to clean up at the end of it. And our preschool teacher came in and it was a mess up there. It hadn't been swept. The garbages hadn't been taken out. And so we're now at the point where that's an immediate write-up. for them. And so she got a write up. And if we hadn't done that, then the next time that she ran a birthday party, guys, it probably wouldn't have been clean to the right standard. I will tell you that that very next weekend, when she came in and ran her birthday parties, she went up there and took pictures of the space to make sure that she put everything back into place, because she did not want to be written up again. So that communicating those things is so important. We had a staff that came in wearing a jean jacket into practice because she was cold. Yes, she had her proper gear on underneath it, but that to me is not appropriate coaching gear. And so I went up and talked to her right away. She took it off right away, right? So remember that things grow when they are left in the dark. You can't just leave things. I know it sometimes is uncomfortable. That communication piece is so important. Take an opportunity to provide ongoing reminders and training. I know that there's some stats out there that say people need to hear things. I think it's at least 3 times before it actually sinks in. If you have kids, then you can totally relate on that. But even doing stuff like weekly staff meetings. How many of you guys do weekly staff meetings? We do ours, a weekly Zoom meeting, and it has changed drastically our communication with our staff. At the start of the year, it took us a little bit to get back into the groove of putting mats away. I know that there are some of you guys that can relate and think that when the gym is not put away properly. And so that was a big piece of communication for us as well in our weekly staff meetings. Then you need to schedule. Remember that you're also a coach for your staff. So schedule an opportunity to do stuff like evaluations with them, quarterly check-ins. I just did quarterly check-ins with our staff to talk about where they're at, what we would like to see them improve on, what their goals are, so that we can communicate that with them regularly. Then the next piece under the communication is you need to take an opportunity to evaluate when somebody screws up. Was it something that I did? Was it a lack of training? Was it in the hiring process, in the onboarding process? Have I communicated these expectations to our staff? What do the systems actually look like? Danielle had posted yesterday a really great post about her coffee machine that the staff member didn't know how to put together. Guys, my doorbell just rang. Remember again too, guys, I know Pat Lencioni said it in the video, accountability applies to everyone. So as owners, we need to be willing to hold other people accountable. He said it very well, that if you're going to do it, then they will start to do it. The really great thing is when you have that peer-to-peer accountability, and your staff member are going to start holding each other accountable, right? So if we're not willing to do it, then your staff are not going to be willing to do it. So the next piece on here that I want you to jot down and post in the chat, what are some things that you currently do or can start to implement to encourage accountability and that healthy conflict between them? So take a minute and just post that in the chat. So what are some things either that you're currently doing or that you can start to implement to encourage that accountability and healthy conflict, whether or not it's improving your systems, writing out a better system for cleaning, talking to staff right away. For a lot of our clients too that we talk to, the cleaning is a big one, and staff not following through on that. And so the one thing that has helped when we were having our staff do all the cleaning and stuff was to have a checklist that it was assigned. First, we started off by just having a checklist on the back of the door where the expectation was at the end of your shift, you have to just go clean something, find something, mark it off. And so we find that people just weren't doing it, right? But once we started assigning particular tasks to those people and then this expectation for them to sign it off, that helped tremendously for us, because then those things became their responsibility. So improving systems and not being so afraid of confrontation. And I think that I've kind of realized that it's not always confrontation, right? It doesn't have to be viewed as a confrontation. It's we need to, again, unleash the greatness in our staff. If we're not going to hold them to a high standard, they're not going to get there. A lot of them are not as self-motivated, right? And so we need to get them, hold them to that high standard. Otherwise, they just won't get there. It's the same thing as our kids. Savannah, we need to implement the write-up process. Absolutely. That helps significantly. And then it also gives you a leg to stand on if you get to the point where you need to let somebody go. And Steph said a list that is checked off when complete and it's posted in Trello. Totally. Hopefully, I wonder if you do that currently or going to do that. So those are really great examples, you guys, of things that either if you're doing or you can definitely start to do. So if there are things that you are frustrated with, again, take that opportunity to evaluate what can you change in your hiring, in your onboarding, in your systems that will help that, and then decrease that lag time. So when someone brings a concern, circle back to them and let them know that it was done to address their concerns. Great, and you do that currently. That's awesome. Trello is amazing. Yeah, so those, again, guys, standards, number one. Number two, communication. Those are the two big important things. And I know sometimes systems, we talk about them a lot and they seem daunting and they seem overwhelming, but they help tremendously in being able to make sure that your staff are doing things the way you want them to do, and then you can hold them accountable. Okay, so now let's talk, you're holding your staff accountable. Now what? Because you're going to have to do more than just hold them accountable. So number one, you guys, is gratitude. Thank you cards, shout outs on staff pages. Anytime we get an email from a parent that are happy with our staff, we share it like crazy in our staff pages. We launched our core value pins. So we have 5 core values and we got like the hit 0 buttons. We got those, put our core values on each, a core value on all these different pins. I know that Shelly does a band as well, those plastic bands with her core values on them. And we have a customer experience specialist who just started with us in September, and she's fantastic, has been going over and above. And so one of our pins is investment. So we gave her a pin, we rang the bell in the gym, and we gave her that big shout out and stuff, and then posted in our members group. So those, just being able to show gratitude for those is tremendous for them, and they're going to then start to really buy in and go over and above for you. Quarterly, again, I talked about quarterly reviews and check-ins. Those are important pieces as well to show your gratitude and communicate with them. And then number 2 as well is provide them with opportunities in the gym and outside of the gym. When people start to realize that you value them and you value their contribution, then they're going to start to go over and above and start to take initiative. And especially when you start to show that you trust them. So are there opportunities for growth, taking on more challenges? So just with when we hire new staff, we always start them as coaches for classes, and then they can move on to prep teams, and then they can move on to all-star coaches, unless of course we've hired somebody specifically for all-star coaches or for all-star teams. However, vast majority of our staff are ones that we hire and go through that. So then they can see that, yes, there is an opportunity for growth within the gym, and have kind of some goals to move from there. And then secondly, is there any opportunity as well for them to develop personally outside of the gym that will help them either within your gym or outside of the gym as well? Our social media coordinator, she is outstanding, and it's because I've given her and has really taken ownership of our social media, and is very passionate about making sure that it's done very, very well. But we sent her off to a social media, it's called Social School, to a conference, loved it, and then came back and said, hey, they have an online training course, I'd love to take it, will you pay for half? And I said, absolutely, right? So then they start to take ownership of those things when you start to show that you trust them. Lori, some of you guys have seen her as well. She's our front desk staff. She's starting to be able to take on more, and we've taken her now to conferences, and she's speaking at the Next Gen conference, and just showing that your staff, that you really value and appreciate them as well. So what kind of opportunities can you provide and help them to grow? Matt, our all-star coordinator, is also loves graphic design. And so we purchased Photoshop and all the Adobe programs for him. And he's now starting to do all of the in-house graphic t-shirt designs, our banners and stuff. And then now that he's been doing that, I've been sending him recommendations for other people to do it as well, right? So just be creative, find out what your staff is passionate about and help them to grow in those areas. The other thing that we do as well is we have a career path for our staff, and it's pretty clear on how they can increase their wages. And it basically goes through the different modules that we have, and every time that they complete a birthday party module or the different skill level modules or read a certain book or whatever, then they have an opportunity to get a raise. And so it's just very clear for them on how they can grow within the business. Steph said she does Starbucks $5 gift cards, and when they catch staff doing something that impresses them, yeah, you give them, great, they cover a class or the front desk last minute and gives them the $5 gift cards. Yeah, those are so great. I mean, thank you cards are awesome too, right? Anytime that somebody's recognized, they feel so appreciated. So let's chat a little bit about the next piece on there. What are some things that you currently do or can start to implement that show gratitude or provide opportunities for your staff? Share those in the comments. I know Steph did already, which is awesome. We're doing the 12, I think vast majority of our Academy members are doing the 12 days of Christmas for staff. So we're doing that as well. That's a little gift for the first 12 days of Christmas. And it works out great for us that our Christmas party is on Friday the 13th as well. So we have the 12 days of Christmas that leads right up into our Christmas party for our staff. So just little things like that. Chelsea does handwritten thank you cards and gift cards. Yeah, so the 12 days of Christmas, we do give everybody for the first 12 days gifts up until there, but only it's at the gym. And Steph, I'll tell you, it's just little things, right? Like lip balms because they're the bomb. And my front desk coordinator, she's taking the lead on it. And she has her whole list of all the things that we're doing for it. But, and I can't remember all of them. So I can track down what they are because I can't remember all of them, but it's just little things. So we're not spending a whole lot on it, but it's just a way to show appreciation at Christmas time for them. Yeah. Yep. A career path is really great. Yeah. If you're in the Next Gen managers group, Lori actually shared the full list of what she's doing in there for all the different items. And if you have a manager that you'd like to add to it as well, make sure to do that. So join the Next Gen managers group, and then you can scroll down and see what Lori had posted for that. But it's pretty fun, all the little things that we're doing for that. Great. Yeah, and random food days for everyone with themes and just in time to chat together. The one thing too that we did on all of our weekly staff meetings. So we do a weekly staff meeting on Zoom on Sunday evenings, and we start our staff meeting off with something great. And I know that's not necessarily recognition specifically for staff, but sometimes it is. So they each share something great that happened in their week, and it's a really amazing way to start the meeting, just so that we can celebrate the great things that are happening in everybody's lives. Sometimes they give shout outs to and appreciations to other staff members. So just that has been a really great addition to our staff meetings too. We do, for all of the Canadians, I know we have National Coaches Week in September. So I fed them, I made homemade meals for the full week pretty much. And that was a really great way to show appreciation too. So a lot of this stuff doesn't have to cost a lot of money, but it helps with your staff morale a lot. So again, guys, just as we're wrapping up here, if you have any questions, again, post them in the comments, reach out as well, and I'm happy to help that. But when you're talking staff accountability, there's certain steps to it. Number one, it's those standards. What standards do you have in place for your hiring, for your onboarding, for your training, and then also follow through and holding staff accountable? What kind of write-up system do you have? So that's standards include your stuff like your core values, what you stand for, the systems. So those are kind of the standards and expectations. And then the second piece is that communication, right? You have to be communicating, decrease that lag time from the time that something happens. Don't let it get to be something big, because again, things that are in the dark will grow and you don't want them to grow. Okay. And then lastly, take that opportunity to recognize your staff. They're doing outstanding things. Provide that recognition, that gratitude to your staff, because ultimately you couldn't do it without them, right? And then when you do those things, you will be amazed at the staff and how they start to take on ownership of, they will start to care just as much as you do about the success of your gym, the success of your teams and stuff. Once you start to do those things, it's pretty outstanding. So again, guys, if you have not already signed up for conference, make sure to join us at conference on January 14th and 15th in Las Vegas. We hope to see you guys there. If you have any questions about anything, definitely feel free to reach out to me. You can send me a PM. I'm happy to help in any way. Thank you and have a great weekend.